So yeah, I didn't know it was possible. Otherwise, I think I might have made a plan to do it earlier on, perhaps. But yeah, I started off, made a Facebook page, put a post in a local Facebook group, and then eventually got my first inquiry, which was 11 plus. So I started with that all face to face.
Hello, my name's Jenna. I'm an online primary tutor, and today I'm talking to Portia, who is the founder of Tutoring Portia, about how to quit teaching and start a tutoring business. If you are a new tutor just starting out, let me know down in the comments. Thank you very much for joining me today, Portia.
Thank you for having me. I'm
It's
excited to be
lovely to
here.
Yeah, it's lovely to finally chat to you. We know each other through the Facebook world, tutoring Facebook world, and we've been in contact several times. And for me, you are the go-to tutor of how to make your tutoring business look very professional online.
Ah, thank you. I know it's taken us too long to actually meet up and chat, hasn't it?
Definitely. And when you got in touch and said you'd like to chat for here, so I was really, really chuffed.
Oh,
But we'll
good.
go back to your teaching career, obviously.
Mhm.
And you were a year six teacher. Now, for anyone that doesn't know about what a year six teacher is, can you give us a brief description of what you had to do for that role?
Yeah, of course. So I was, a year six teacher. Did that for 4 years. And I was responsible for basically the children in their final year of primary school and prepared them for their end of year SATs, which they sit in May. I taught all primary subjects, but in year six, the main focus is reading, writing, and maths because those are the subjects that are covered in the SATs.
And what were the positives and the challenges of year six? Because for everyone knows about year six teacher if they have a child that goes to school, but I don't think they understand the pressures of a year six teacher because it's huge in primary.
Yeah, definitely. And a lot of our end of year targets as a teacher were based on the SATs results as well. And to get
Yeah.
your yearly pay increase, you had to meet those targets. So there was a lot of pressure, which seems really sad because sometimes that does rub off onto the children and they can feel that pressure as well. And it shouldn't be the case. So it's not something I agree with. And one of the reasons why I don't go back into teaching now is because I don't agree with all of that testing. So that was one of the challenges. And also having to work with so many students in the classroom of all these different needs as well. It was just me as a teacher with 30 children. I had a TA for, I think it was 3 mornings of the week,
Which
but
isn't a
not
lot.
yeah, not long at all. As a year six teacher as well, when you've got so many things to get through. So being able to cater for all of those additional needs and behaviour issues as well was quite challenging. But I loved it. I loved having, I'm saying it's all negative, but I did love having that goal of the SATs. And then once you do get to May and you do those SATs, you've then got June and July where you basically chill and enjoy the actual nice part of teaching and doing all of those extracurricular activities and subjects as well. And you could spend more time doing that. So that's a real benefit of being in year six, is having that time at the end of the year.
Oh, and when did you notice that you started to think, this isn't for me anymore? Was there a particular turning point or was it gradual over time?
So I wasn't planning to leave the classroom at all. I actually really liked teaching. And so what I did is I moved house. So I moved away from my teaching job. If I hadn't done that, I think I'd still be in that school now and actually enjoying my teaching. So I think I'm one of those rare people that came away from teaching and didn't actually have that much of a negative experience. I know it was hard work and I spent a lot of extra time working. And like you said, there was a lot of pressure. Um, but it was something that I did really enjoy, and I think I would still be doing now if I hadn't moved house.
Oh, that is so unique because a lot of people left on my channel for a particular reason.
Mm.
Not one of them have said, oh, it's because I moved house. So that's
Yeah.
actually really interesting. So,
Yeah, so it was good timing because my school coincidentally were going from 5 classes down to 4 and we're offering voluntary redundancy at the time. And that's before
okay.
I'd handed my notice in, but I'd already made the plan to move house anyway. So I was really lucky and I was able to take voluntary redundancy. And from that, I got a good pay. But because I had that voluntary redundancy pay, I couldn't then get a full-time job. So
Oh, okay.
that was why I didn't go straight back into teaching after the summer holidays. I had to take a step back. I did some supply because I could do supply and still receive the pay. And then I decided that I would get a job a few months later. But then tutoring happened, so that's why I didn't.
Oh, so before we go on to tutoring then, so how come you're not allowed to get a job? I didn't know that. Is that just part of the
Um,
conditions?
because you're basically being paid for the time off because you've been left with no job. So
Got
that
you,
redundancy pay covers the amount of time that you would perhaps spend looking for your next job.
got you.
So I could have gotten you a full-time job if I wanted to start in September because I left school in August. But I got this like 2-3 month pay, which meant I could have got the job, but I wouldn't have got the pay. So I'd rather have the few months off, take a bit of a break, and then think about getting a job from sort of like October, November time instead. That was my plan.
That's lovely. And then how did you find supply?
I hated it. I think it was down to it being COVID times. So it was 4 years
Course.
ago. It was masks and visors, so it was impossible for the children to hear you. It's hard anyway going in as a supply teacher, isn't it? But
Yep,
with all of that extra stuff going on, it was even harder. But yeah, I stuck at it. I didn't do it for that long because tutoring started. But yeah, I wouldn't have carried it on full time, I don't think.
fair enough. And where did you get the idea of tutoring from? Did you see someone else do it, or had you heard about it through something else? Where did that come up?
Yeah, I don't know. I was trying to think about this. I think it was possibly hearing it through being a teacher in school. And as a year 6 teacher, some of the children go on to do the 11 plus and therefore had tutors for the 11 plus.
Mhm.
And I'd done a bit of, I guess, tutoring, extra support for the SATs for the children in school, but after school. Um, but I didn't know it could be a full-time job. I thought it was just like retired teachers would do that a few hours a week, a bit on the side. Um, so yeah, I didn't know it was possible. Otherwise, I think I might have made a plan to do it earlier on, perhaps. But yeah, I started off, made a Facebook page, put a post in a local Facebook group, and then eventually got my first inquiry, which was 11 plus. So I started with that all face to face back then as well.
Oh, so how was that face to face then? Because I did face to face and now I'm online, and I don't
Hmm.
know if you're the same.
Yeah.
But how did you find face to face the positives, the challenges?
Yeah. So again, to start with, I thought that was the only option face to face. I heard of people doing online by being through some Facebook forums. But I said to my students, like, I don't know how tutors do it online. I don't know how it works. I'll never be online. So I live in quite a rural area. So to my local town, it's about a 15-20 minute drive. So to get to those students, I was obviously having to factor in that driving time. And then you'll probably know when you get there, the parents chat to you. You need to get there a bit early. At the end of the hour session, they chat to you again. So it's basically double your time by the time you factored in all
Yeah.
of that extra. And I was charging a much lower rate as well, but I just thought that was normal. I didn't really know any other options. So I just went with it, had a couple of students that way. And then it was when COVID lockdown happened and everybody had to make the transition to going online. So I was kind of forced into it initially, and then realized I quite liked it.
Oh, now before we go on to that, so when you were like kind of doing face to face tutoring, were you looking for another teaching job, or did you just park that?
So I was doing supply alongside, excuse
Oh, of
me. So I
course. So that
was doing
was
some supply
interlinked.
daytime work and then visiting some face-to-face students in the
Right.
evening. And then it got to the stage and the schools closed that I was doing online, that I was offered like a full-time 6-week job supply. And I was kind of on the edge, like, oh, do I want to do this or do I go for it with the tutoring? So it was a really hard decision. And in the end, I turned down the supply job, and thought, right, I'm just going to go for it with the tutoring. Yeah, so that I was kind of doing a mixture of things and not really sure what direction everything was going in to start with.
And how did that feel to make that jump? Were you scared or were you like quite excited or
I was scared. I was really lucky that I was in a financial situation that I had that redundancy pay that I still had. I had really good savings because until then I'd been living with my parents, and then I just moved in with my boyfriend as well into his house. So financially I was really lucky that I didn't have too many pressures on that, and I could kind of take that risk. And I understand that there are so many teachers in a position where they can't, because they have got mortgages, etc., to pay for. So I think I was really lucky that I was encouraged by people just to try it. And if it didn't work, it's okay. I could fall back and go back into the classroom. And that's kind of what I thought I'd have to do. Um, so yeah, scary, but I was lucky that I had that safety blanket behind me.
definitely a lot of teachers like you are right, and you probably as well know about life after teaching group and all that kind of stuff.
Mm,
And the amount of teachers that are desperate to leave, but they just can't financially. And it's
yeah.
so sad that they feel trapped. So then, how did online transform everything?
So online was difficult to start with because my laptop was rubbish and I needed to get all of the extra tech and things, and I didn't understand how it worked. But Facebook groups were really helpful, and I've learned literally everything from those Facebook groups back then, posting questions in there and people being really kind and helpful, and offering support and advice on how online basically works. And yeah, I just went with it. I signed up to a few agencies, which I didn't really know were a thing, but someone contacted me because they'd seen me on Facebook and offered me students. So I had a couple of my own students and about 10 or so through agencies. And yeah, tried out lots of different platforms, settled eventually on using Zoom and BitPaper, which I still use now. And it meant that I could have 5 or 10 minute slots between each student rather than traveling in my car to each one. It meant that I didn't have to leave my house, which during COVID was much better as well. It meant that I could reach students all over the country. So I wasn't restricted to my little tiny Southeast Cornwall area, which people don't really have tuition as much down here anyway. So it just opened up a lot more opportunities for me. And I realised that actually I did like online tutoring and I wasn't going to go back to face to face.
Yeah, I was the same as you because even though it's 20 minutes to that child's house, times that by two, 40 minutes obviously. And then like you say, all the chatting and everything, and it's lovely. But when you know, petrol cost, the resource cost, everything involved, it when you look at it from a bigger perspective, you think, if I want this to work in the long term, it's just not going to happen. And
Yeah.
like you say, you can get more lessons in. So
Hmm.
then at what point did you start to think, I'm going to expand this? Oh, actually, before we go into that, were you just evenings initially when you went full time?
Yeah, mainly evenings. I had a few home educated students, a couple through myself and a few through an agency as well. But yeah, mainly working evenings. So that was another perk that I liked, my new lifestyle of having my days to myself, kind of like a lady of leisure. I didn't have much admin to do back then, but just being a solo tutor. So yeah, that was a big perk as well.
And what did you think about working with agencies? Like, what were the perks initially working with agencies?
I really liked it because they found the students for me. They did all of the admin, they did all the invoicing, the billing, and as you probably know, there's a lot of work that goes into
Yeah.
that side of things. So that was great, and they gave me advice on how things worked as well. I could set my own pay rate. I literally had to plan my lesson, turn up and deliver it, and that's it. So that was just something less to think about because when you're first starting a business, I wasn't a businesswoman at all. I was just a teacher. So I didn't understand about terms and conditions and payment and invoicing and taking payment and tax and things. So it was really nice to have that side of everything sorted for me, and I could just concentrate on the teaching side of it.
And that's a bit of a novelty when you first come out of teaching, because obviously there's so much paperwork and teaching involved. So then, when did you think, right, I'm going to expand and take on others? Because I
Mhm.
would find that so scary to take on others, but
Yeah.
you have got a team now, and you've got a very good
Yeah.
team from the looks of it.
Okay, so it was in the January of when all the schools closed, and I had so everyone wanted tuition basically because no one was going into school. So I took on all of these extra students, took on too much, and I was teaching 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. 5 days a week. And it was crazy, basically. Yeah, I think I was really lucky because that was at the beginning of my tutoring career, and timing wise, that was great because it got my name out there. There was lots of word of mouth, people saying, oh, I found this tutor online. And I was working with some students every day because they were desperate for tuition because schools weren't providing anything. But obviously, when schools did open up again, I had all of these students that I couldn't then work with just after school because I didn't have the hours between 4 and 8 p.m., for example. So I thought, well, I've worked for agencies and I've seen being the tutor side of it. Why don't I take on a tutor who could take on these extra students that I can no longer work with? So that's what I did when those students went back to school. I found another tutor and she took on those students that I didn't have time for, basically. And I was still able to earn a bit of money. I wasn't earning much from each student, probably only about £3 per lesson. But it meant that they were staying on my books and they were staying within tutoring with Portia than going elsewhere.
And how was it working with another colleague again after obviously coming from school? Because it's a bit of a shock. You
Mm,
know, you're in school, you're surrounded by loads of colleagues all the time, loads of people to turn to. Then you go to work independently. You've obviously enjoyed it, but
mm.
was it weird then going back to working with people?
Um, Not particularly. I did enjoy it. To be honest, day to day, you don't talk to that person and you don't really work with that person as a team member exactly.
Oh, of
It's more
course.
just sort of passing the students on to them and then receiving a bit of feedback now and again, chatting to them if I've got a new student that's looking for a tutor and to find out their availability. But it's different to being in the classroom and being in a staff room and chatting to each other all the time. I don't talk to my tutors loads. That sounds really bad, doesn't it? But
But
there's
you're
no
busy
need
though, you're
to.
constantly busy, like you've
Yeah,
got students
exactly.
and
And
everything.
I think what they like about it is that they don't have to be too involved exactly and come to staff meetings, etc., because that's one of the reasons why people leave teaching. They're still independent tutors themselves, but I'm just providing students for them.
And how many tutors do you have now working?
I think there's about 16 of us at the moment.
Oh, wow, you've done brilliant. That's amazing.
Yeah.
And I have read on your posts when I've been reading, because you're always reading,
Mm.
aren't you, different posts online, and
Yeah.
you do actually provide support for your tutors, don't you? Or have I
Yeah.
read that?
Yeah, so I do. So I provide them with training because a lot of tutors that come to me are perhaps still full-time teachers and are using me as an agency as a sort of stepping point to get into tuition. So a lot of them haven't done online tutoring before, so I provide training to them on how best I feel online tuition works. Obviously, everybody can find their own ways that work best for them. But yes, I provide training in online tuition and also support with building up their own businesses as well, because I always encourage the tutors to have their own tuition businesses, work for other agencies, or find their own students as well. So I provide startup business support for them too.
Well, that's lovely because like, you do your calls as well, don't you? You do
Hmm.
your one-to-one calls for tutors, and I've noticed you've had a few of those lately, and they always
Yeah,
seem to give you good feedback, which is lovely.
yeah, I really enjoy that because I think I've been through it and it was difficult, and there's so many lessons I've learned along the way. And everybody that I have had meetings with have found it really helpful to hear how my business runs, even if it's just literally the whole startup thing at the beginning, thinking about different things to think about, terms and conditions, different policies that you need, etc., and how I take payment. That all takes a lot of research at the beginning as a tutor. So if you've got someone there that just sort of tells you what they did from experience, everybody's found that really helpful. So yeah, I offer startup tuition business support and then also support for tutors looking to expand further. Maybe they want to take on a team of tutors or perhaps go into more group tuition as well.
Lovely. So what advice would you give So we'll do this in two ways. So what advice would you give to a new tutor just starting out
Mhm.
anyway? Just totally new, totally for starting from scratch.
First one would be that it's a big mindset shift to start with, from being just a teacher to an actual business owner. So you've got to basically take away your nice self often, I say, and you've just got to be more business minded, because you are going to get parents that question cancellation policies. For example, they might want to cancel a few hours before the lesson and not expect to pay for it, but that's not okay, because you're not going to be paid for that hour if they don't pay. So having things like that in place, your terms and conditions, your cancellation policy, and sticking to them as well. Again, really hard to shift that mindset, because as a teacher, you're trying to always be nice to people. I'm obviously trying to be nice. But yeah, you've got to think what's right for your business as well, and what's going to make you money. So that's probably the hardest thing that I found. And then I would really suggest going to work for agencies initially. So whilst you're building up your own business, taking on students through agencies and learning from those agencies as well. Because it's really difficult initially to find your own students. I found it really hard, especially being face to face and only being able to look in my own area, because back then I wasn't doing online. Working for those agencies really helped me and gave me confidence that I could do it.
That's lovely. And what about then if maybe you establish you've got loads of hours like you were and
Mm.
you're thinking about bringing on other tutors, where did you look for legal advice? Because that's obviously a whole thing. You've got to do it correctly so that
Mm.
people are paid fairly and obviously you don't get in trouble. How would you advise someone on that if they're starting to look into that?
Yeah, it's definitely the hardest part of my business at the moment, is all the legal stuff. And a few years ago, the employment agency standards changed, and agencies like myself had to change the structure of their businesses and how they work and how they employ tutors and how payments are made, etc. So initially, when that advice was brought out, it was difficult to understand, and it was written in a way that, I don't know, people wouldn't automatically be able to understand what it said unless you had a lawyer there reading it for you and explaining.
Oh, that's a bit.
So there was a lot of panic, and I know agencies that closed because of those new rules that came in, when it turns out actually they could have just made a few tweaks and changed a few things and then carried on. But I know some that were scared and did end up closing their agency side of the business, which is a real shame.
Oh,
Yeah, and there's a lot of scaremongering and a lot of false information and people commenting on posts and things in Facebook with things that aren't quite right. Um, so I would suggest to ignore all of that. Get some legal advice. There are webinars and things by Lawhound, for example, and they've got great packages. They've got free blog posts, and a few other businesses as well that offer that. So yeah, go to someone that can give you proper advice rather than reading all of those Facebook posts and comments, because there's a lot of that out there that can scare people and confuse people. And it's taken a lot of reading and understanding to be where I am today with it.
oh, well, it's been lovely chatting to you. So before we finish, what are you currently offering and where can people find you?
Okay, so we're offering, well, my personal tuition, I'm offering one-to-one and small groups, and I've got a team of tutors that offer that as well, and that's in English, maths and science to primary and secondary students. I'm also taking on new tutors at the moment, so I'm desperate for secondary maths tutors at the moment, but also looking for secondary English and primary based subjects as well, so taking on new tutors. And then I also offer business support calls, whether you're starting out or looking to grow your tuition business. And you can find me on Tutoring with Portia on Facebook or Instagram or on my website as well.
Ah, lovely. Well, thank you so much. I've learned loads from you. It's been absolute pleasure.
Oh, thank you, Jenna. It's been lovely to chat with you.
I know it's been really nice, but thank you very much. And if you like today's video, make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to see who else I'm chatting to, and check out the details down below.